Support for this podcast comes from the law firm of Davis Malm. Whether you're a developer, property owner, manager, or commercial tenant, their real estate attorneys know the lay of the land, not just the law. Learn more at davismalm.com.
WBUR Podcasts, Boston.
I'm Daryl C. Murphy, and you're listening to The Common. Andrea Perdomo-Hernandez, WBUR transportation reporter. Welcome back to The Common.
Thanks, Daryl. It's good to be here.
Yes. So let's talk about it. South Coast Rail. It's almost here.
Yes.
The line reconnecting Boston to New Bedford, Taunton and Fall River. It's almost done. Andrea, tell us more about this project and how it came to be.
Sure. So back in the day, there was service connecting Boston to these South Coast communities. Service ran probably up until 1958.
Mm-hmm.
Since the 80s, people have been trying to bring it back.
Mm-hmm.
There's been conversations about the benefits of connecting Boston to these communities, different ways to get people out of their cars, so there have been whispers of bringing it back.
South Coast Rail.
Exactly. But efforts, real kind of legislative tooth, let's get some money to get this going, has been happening since the 90s.
Mm-hmm.
They're oh, we got money for this. And then it's nothing really happens. And it's oh, let's put some money aside for this. And doesn't really happen. So for people on the South Coast, hearing South Coast Rail is almost kind of the will it, won't it kind of question. Will this thing ever come to be?
Yeah.
And it is. Construction has started. A lot of money has been spent. So the train is coming. It's now the question is just when?
Yeah.
Trains were supposed to start running by the end of this year. But construction, according to the latest updates from the team, construction should wrap up by the end of this year. Then they got to do tests and all of that.
Mm-hmm.
And then the trains will supposedly start running next summer.
So there's a long history here with the South Coast Rail. It existed until 1958. They stopped it. And then in the 80s, some people decide they want to bring it back. What caused that decision?
What I understand is the reason why this started, the reconnecting the service started becoming a thing was that some people thought there was some economic benefit to connecting Boston to these South Coast communities.
Mm-hmm.
If you build the train, they will come. Maybe businesses will come, or people will be able to get to Boston more easily.
Yeah. Why is it such a will they, won't they issue if this is something that people have wanted for so long?
Because there's been so many false starts, let's say, right? The legislature secures the money, but then there's never a plan. So it was under Governor Baker that the money was allocated and then a plan came forward, right?
Okay.
When I talked to State Senator Mark Montigny, he's been one of those people at the forefront since the 90s, really, really fighting for this. And he said that he's been to so many groundbreaking ceremonies that he has his own shovel. He doesn't take the shovel that they give him at these things,
He said, I brought my own.
Yeah, he's this is from the groundbreaking way back when.
Yeah, that's funny.
And for him, he's been to so many of those things that he's a little bit not jaded, but cynical,
Yeah.
He's from New Bedford. New Bedford's part of the part of his district that he represents, and this is what he had to say.
The wishful thinking and the hope back then was, if you build it, they will come. Who are they? Well, companies will come and set up shop because now their employees can go back and forth.
That sounds like a pretty good benefit, connecting these communities to Boston. Boston has expensive rent, so you create a way for people to perhaps live in other communities and stuff.
That's what it's has evolved to now, right?
Yeah.
Right. So initially they were oh, if we have this connection to Boston, it'll bring Boston business to this area.
Yeah.
Right. But that was 30 years ago. So now that vision has changed a little bit versus of oh, this is going to bring us business. But this is kind of oh, now we can have new residents here. We have attractions here that people maybe can come for the day and just come see.
Mm-hmm. But even still, with that said, you have people moving from town to town between places, and especially with Boston in the mix. What are the concerns there about what that can do to these communities?
Yep.
When we're talking about, because we're in Massachusetts where housing is very high and people are looking for cheaper places to live.
Right. So when we're talking about making the South Coast more attractive, right? Maybe not just to businesses, but now to people in general. And you look at how expensive Boston is, and now you're creating like an easy way to get back and forth. There have been people that are really concerned about New Bedford, which is considerably cheaper to live than Boston, attracting new people to live, kind of changing the fabric of that community.
Mm-hmm.
So I spoke with this guy. His name's Andrea. He's a longtime New Bedford resident. He's a community activist. He has been flagging these concerns about, like, if you attract new people to New Bedford, what's going to happen to the people who live here?
Yep.
And I have a little clip of that.
It's great to increase the transportation, but if it's for the community, when you're saying community, what community are you talking about? Are you talking about the community that's pre-existing here? Are you talking about the community that will be attracted to move here?
What else are you hearing from residents?
So I went down to the bus terminal down in New Bedford. Right now, there's only like one mass transit option to actually get people from New Bedford to Boston. It's like a Peter Pan line.
Mm-hmm.
It leaves at 7 a.m. It's the only option. You miss that bus, you are out of gas. Like, there's no other way for you to get to Boston. So I went there to go talk to commuters, and I met this guy. His name's Phil Zukas, and he has to come to Boston for work. And this is what he had to say.
We're still pretty behind the times here, and it would be great to have some means of making this easier for everyone.
How often do you think you would use it?
Well, I'm working 4 days a week now, and that's to Boston. I would definitely use it at least 4 days a week, and maybe on the weekends if there was an option.
So he's one of those people that has to come here regularly, right? And he's really relying on that one bus.
Mm-hmm.
He misses that bus, he can't get to work, you know? So he's kind of like that target, like, user that, like, when you talk to, like, the mayor of New Bedford or you talk to, like, Senator Montigny, you know, like, who would really benefit from this, like, out the gate?
Right.
And it would be people like him that do need to commute back and forth.
We're going to take a break, but we'll be right back.
Did you kill Marlene Johnson?
I think you're one of the first people to have actually asked.
From WBUR and ZSP Media, this is Beyond All Repair, a new podcast about an unsolved murder that will leave you questioning everything.
Somebody should be in jail for murdering my sister.
A woman who's never been believed.
As long as they think I have done this, then they're not looking for who actually did this.
And that's what makes it a cold case.
No, it's a botched case.
And a search for the truth, once and for all.
Wow, it just gets more interesting.
Beyond All Repair. Listen and follow wherever you get your podcasts.
Be careful. You're digging in a place that's been very peaceful for a while.
Do it anyway. Dig.
And we're back with more from Andrea Perdomo-Hernandez. How often will the trains run? How long will the trip take? And how much will it cost?
Right. So when we're talking about, like, critics, right, or, like, what some of the worries are,
yeah,
there's the gentrification and, like, the impact that, like, bringing this service will have on the community, but also just, like, the project itself, like, how it's laid out. I talked to a couple of transportation advocates, and they're concerned about capacity constraints and also frequency.
Yeah.
So according to the T, the train, as planned, right, is going to have 3 morning, like, rush hour trains.
3?
And then 3, evening rush hour trains. And in between those rush hours, the train is going to run at 3 to 3.5 hour frequencies. So, like, I spoke with former Transportation Secretary Jim Aloisi, and what he said is, like the makings of, like, a successful, like, project, or, like, what would entice people to use public transportation is, like, the ability of, like, if I need to get home at whatever time, can I do it? And he worries that the frequency as planned is not going to be appealing for people. So here is some sound from former Massachusetts Transportation Secretary Jim Aloisi.
What I worry about is building rail systems that end up disappointing people, which is what I think is likely to happen here. And in that disappointment, then we once again make people question the propriety of spending a lot of money on rail projects.
So disappointing, right? And so not only that, we don't know if the train's going to run on the weekends.
Yep.
And the trip from New Bedford to Boston is going to run about 90 minutes.
Ooh, okay.
You can get there faster by car.
Yeah.
I mean, given traffic and all that stuff, you can get there faster driving.
Yeah.
The bus, the Peter Pan bus, takes about 90 minutes now.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And the cost of, at least from New Bedford to Boston, is going to cost about $13 each way.
Mm-hmm.
And right now, the Peter Pan fare is about $9.
Having said all of that, what is at stake here?
Through the conversations that I had with transportation advocates, the stakes are pretty high. This project was costly. Phase one, a little over $1 billion. And a real metric for success is going to be ridership.
Mm-hmm.
And if the ridership isn't there, there's a fear or a worry that it'll reflect poorly on projects that are in the works or people hope will come. So if the ridership isn't there, there's a fear that people will be like, why are we investing in expanding regional rail if no one's going to use it?
Yeah. Did the T do the necessary research and studies to really get a sense of the need for this project?
Well, Daryl, there have been echoes, and calls for this for 30 years.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
The projections that the T released of ridership even before the pandemic, they knew that they would, that the fare revenue wasn't going to be there. They were, so, they were estimating that the entire project would probably attract 4,400 riders, straight out the gate.
Mm-hmm.
And then the fare revenue from that would be about $9 million.
Mm-hmm.
But the total operating cost annually would be up to $20 million. So they knew that the fare revenue wasn't going to make it break even. And I just want to and I know that sounds that makes you take it back. But it's public transportation is not a lucrative, most things are being operated at a loss.
Yeah.
Already. But what I'm saying is that they knew out the gate that ridership wasn't, was going to be maybe a little bit low. And it's not clear now how many people are going to ride it now that the way that people work and get around has changed. It's going to be interesting to see how the T and even the municipalities that are going to be getting this service, how they promote it and how they try to encourage people to use it. There's a lot still that we don't know about in practice and theory how this is going to work, So for people that have been promising it to their constituents for a long time, I would say it's a W.
Yeah.
And then we'll see. TBD.
We'll see. TBD. Andrea, thank you so much for this really interesting conversation about South Coast Rail, bringing some clarity, bringing some information. We really, really appreciate it. As always, it's been a pleasure.
Thanks, Daryl.
That's WBUR transportation reporter Andrea Perdomo-Hernandez. And that's our show for today. Thank you so much for listening to The Common. If you want to get in touch with us, head on over to Instagram, send us a DM or something at WBUR The Common. You can also send us an email at thecommon@wbur.org. I'm Daryl C. Murphy, and I will talk to you tomorrow.